I fell in love with the one person I was never supposed to love. Her name was Serafina Bellamy, and in my family, that last name was enough to start a fight. I grew up hearing that the Bellamys were the reason we could never live in peace. My father spoke about them with so much hate, I thought it had to come from something deep and true. I never asked questions. I just accepted it. Then I met her. She was not what I had been taught. She was quiet, careful, and carried the same heaviness I had known all my life. The first time we talked, it felt easy in a way nothing else did. After that, I could not stop thinking about her. I knew it was wrong. I knew what would happen if anyone found out. But loving her felt more honest than anything my family had ever asked of me. What I did not know was that our being together would bring more than anger. It would pull old secrets into the open. Things hidden for years started to shift. People changed. Faces I trusted started to look different. And little by little, I realized our love was standing on top of something far darker than family hate. Our town looked peaceful to outsiders. People waved from porches, showed up for Sunday service, and spoke like they all cared for one another. But everyone who lived there knew the truth about the road where the Vosses and the Bellamys lived. Their houses stood close enough to see each other's lights at night, yet they might as well have been miles apart. The adults kept things clean in public. They smiled when they had to. They stood in the same rooms during church dinners, school events, and funerals, but there was always a wall between them. It was not loud most of the time. That was what made it worse. The hate sat low and steady, like something that had learned how to survive. As kids, we were never given the full story. We only got pieces. A warning here. A bitter comment there. We learned which names not to say at the table. We learned which driveway not to walk past. We learned that some people were treated like enemies before we were old enough to understand why. Years passed, and the silence around it all became its own kind of lesson. Nobody explained the damage. Nobody named the lie. They just handed us the anger and expected us to carry it like it belonged to us. The day I really met Serafina did not feel important at first. A storm had torn through town the night before, and by morning people were out clearing branches, broken fences, and debris. I was working near the edge of an old strip of land that had caused problems between our families for years. Everyone knew that patch of ground carried more anger than it should have. She was there with gloves on, pulling wet limbs away from a damaged fence. Her hair was tied back, and there was mud on her jeans. She looked tired, like she had not slept much, but she kept working without saying a word. I noticed her because she did not act like anyone else around us. No hard stare. No cold look. Just quiet focus. At one point a heavy branch shifted, and I stepped in to help move it. For a second, we both reached for the same side. She looked up at me, careful and unsure, like she was already expecting trouble. I was too. But none came. We spoke only a little that day. Simple things. Nothing that should have mattered. Still, I left thinking about how different she felt from the stories I had grown up hearing. There was sadness in her, but also strength. And somehow, without trying, we saw that same thing in each other. After that day, we kept finding reasons to see each other. Sometimes it was only for a few minutes. Sometimes it was long enough to talk until the air turned cold. We were careful from the start. A place too close to town felt risky. A place too familiar felt worse. So we met where no one paid attention, an empty road outside the fields, the last pew after weeknight prayer, a closed diner parking lot after dark. I started to wait for those moments more than anything else in my life. With Serafina, I did not have to act like the son my family wanted. I did not have to speak with anger or defend things I never believed in. She understood that kind of pressure without needing it explained. Her family watched her in different ways, but the weight was the same. Every choice had already been made for us before we were old enough to make our own. Being with her showed me how much of my life had been built around fear. Fear of disobeying. Fear of being judged. fear of becoming a problem. She felt it too. We did not talk about love at first, but it was there in the way we listened, in the way we stayed, in the way neither of us wanted to go first when it was time to leave. We might have kept our secret longer if Talcott had not seen us first. He was Serafina's cousin, the kind of man who always seemed relaxed, like nothing ever touched him. He knew how to make people trust him. He listened more than he spoke, and that made others careless around him. When Serafina told me he had found out, I expected panic. Instead, she said he had promised to keep quiet. She wanted to believe him because he had always acted like he was on her side. I did not fully trust it, but I let myself hope. That was our mistake. Small things started changing after that. My father began asking where I had been, but not in a normal way. My brother started watching me too closely. At dinner, names came up that had not been spoken in months. Across town, Serafina said her mother had started checking in on her at odd hours and asking questions that felt too specific. It got worse fast. People were no longer guessing. They were circling. Things we had said in private were somehow reaching other ears. Plans had to change at the last minute. Places that once felt safe suddenly did not. By then, it was clear someone had opened a door and stepped back to watch the damage. And the worst part was knowing that person had smiled in our faces while doing it. I found the truth by accident. My father had been out, and I was in his office looking for a property file he had asked me to bring downstairs. Most of the drawers were locked, but one had been left open. Inside was a stack of old papers with names I recognized, dates from years ago, and copies of letters that should not have existed if the story I had grown up with was real. At first, it made no sense. Money had moved through accounts that had nothing to do with the story we had been told. Signatures matched men who claimed they had never worked together. Then I saw one name that stopped me cold. It belonged to a man both families had blamed for everything. I had heard his name my whole life like it meant shame. But the papers showed something else. He had not caused the damage. He had been buried under it. When I showed what I found to Serafina, she went pale before she even finished reading. She said her mother had once mentioned that year and then gone silent like she had said too much. That was when we understood it. The feud had not grown out of truth. It had been built to hide it. The anger, the warnings, the years of silence, none of it was sacred. It was a cover. And we had been raised inside that lie like it was family duty. After we learned the truth, everything changed between us. Loving each other felt different. It was no longer just about hiding and meeting in secret. Every moment together became a quiet rebellion against the lies that had controlled our families for decades. We knew the adults had built their power on fear and silence, and now we wanted to break it. We started gathering proof slowly, carefully. Old letters tucked away in drawers, payment records no one wanted anyone to see, and a retired clerk who remembered what had really happened. One evening, Serafina even found a recording her family had tried to destroy, and it made everything clear. The history we had been fed was false. But the more truth we uncovered, the heavier the pressure became. My father watched me like I had become a stranger. My younger brother openly accused me of shaming the family. Serafina's aunt confronted her, calling her reckless and ungrateful. Small questions became tests of loyalty. Every phone call, every word at the dinner table, every glance could carry suspicion. People who had promised love and protection turned into obstacles, all to preserve the image they had spent their lives building. Our love was no longer just ours, it had become a threat. The night started like any other argument, but it quickly became something neither of us could have imagined. Talcott had lured both families to the old Bellamy farmhouse, claiming we were leaving town forever. My heart sank when we realized it was a trap, but there was no turning back. Everyone was there, our parents, siblings, aunts, and uncles, and the tension in the room felt like it could snap in any second. When the first piece of proof came out, the reaction was immediate. Voices rose, faces turned red, and years of hidden anger poured out all at once. Accusations flew in every direction, some aimed at people who had started the feud decades ago. I tried to stay between Serafina and the men shouting about honor, but even I felt the weight of every word hitting me. Serafina finally faced her mother in front of everyone. She demanded answers about the lies and silence that had shaped their lives. The room went quiet for a moment, but it didn't last. By dawn, everything had changed. Alliances that seemed unbreakable fell apart. Reputations that were carefully built were gone. Both families looked at each other and realized the truth: beneath the respect and tradition, they had all been living with fear, deceit, and pride for far too long. After that night, we knew we had a choice. We could keep running, hiding, or we could let the truth do what violence never could. Serafina and I gathered every piece of proof we had found over months, letters, records, testimonies, and that old recording, and took it to an attorney neither family could control. He was known for being fearless, and he did not care about loyalty or tradition. Once the documents were in his hands, the consequences started immediately. Property disputes froze. Lies that had been protected for decades were exposed. People who had once looked untouchable in church or at town events were suddenly questioned, doubted, and shamed. The families could no longer control what they had spent so long hiding. But the real revenge was quiet and personal. The children, like me and Serafina, refused to return to the lives our families expected. I left the Voss name behind in everything but my blood. She abandoned the Bellamy house and all the rules and expectations that had been pressed onto her since birth. No fight, no bloodshed, no screaming, it was simple, and it cut deeper than any weapon could. The power the families thought they had over us was gone. And for the first time, we were free. We were together at last, but nothing was simple. The past could not be erased. Every conversation reminded us of what had been lost. Trust had to be rebuilt slowly, step by step, because years of lies had taught us to doubt even those closest to us. The grief we carried was quiet but heavy, and we had to face it openly, naming it, feeling it, and holding it together. The families that had seemed untouchable were broken. Their pride, their control, and their carefully kept secrets had crumbled under the weight of the truth. Talcott, who had thought his schemes would bring him power and respect, found himself alone. Neither side would trust him anymore, and his ambition ended in silence. One morning, I went to the grave of the man whose life had been ruined for the sake of our family's lies. Serafina came with me. We did not speak much. There was no grand apology, no perfect ending. Just quiet understanding. Standing there together, we made a choice: to stop carrying the hate, to stop passing down fear, and to let love be stronger than the anger that had haunted our families for generations. We chose each other. And that choice finally changed everything.